fully understand the dukkha from 5 aggregates. So that is consciousness is related to that first function in the fully understand the dukkha.
Yeah.
My question is consciousness being utilized at number 2, understanding the craving to abandon, whether it's used in this third sensation of realizing Nibbana? That's what my question is, whether is dichotomously separated.
I think I understand your question. Wisdom, as the sutta itself says, wisdom and consciousness are always conjoined, so they can't be separated. So when wisdom is being used to understand the first noble truth, consciousness is always present along with that wisdom. When one is abandoning craving, consciousness is present in that act of abandoning craving. When one is realizing Nibbana, since it's a conscious experience, consciousness is present. So consciousness is present all through, all the functions regarding the Four Noble Truths. It's just that in terms of this particular task in regard to consciousness and wisdom, the task regarding consciousness is to fully understand it. The task regarding wisdom is to develop it. Does that make it clear?
Another favor. The last sentence, when you said, in the sutra it says, wisdom is to be developed, consciousness is to be fully understood. Do you think it's possible for you to give us the full sentences in Pali? Sorry.
I didn't actually bring the Pali text with me. Let me just see if I could reconstruct it. Let me look, maybe I had it in the note. No, I just had the explanation in the note.
Bhante, you don't need to give it to us right away. I just want to know the words being used, Pali words being used when you said developed and understood.
Oh, that's easy to do.
Yeah. I'd like to know the distinction in these two words in Pali.
Okay. So the difference is between developed, well, let's say fully understood. Can you see? Maybe better to write on the top. And developed is bhavettabha. Okay, the word pariññaya, fully understood, again, is based on these verbal roots, ñā, with Sanskrit shñā, except that it has the prefix pari, which gives a sense of fullness. In fact, full understanding, you can see this more clearly, is pariññā. Just as paññā is the same base, just a different prefix. Whereas bhavettabha, it's related to the noun bhavana. Bhavana is what sometimes we call it meditation. So So we say vipassana bhavana is insight meditation, but bhavana actually means development or cultivation. It's based on the verb bhaveti, which means to bring into being. So wisdom is something that we have to literally bring into being. And then once it comes into being, then we have to cultivate it further until it becomes parinya, full understanding. You see, there's so much that's, so many like connections between words in the Pali text that are clear in the original language, but when you read translation, those connections are cut because the English language, it's hard to match. Yeah, it's hard to match word for word in the same way. Okay, Stephen, take the microphone.
Bhante, would it be correct to say or think that of it this way, that consciousness cannot be developed, that it's sort of more of a biological function, and so that when we move from just this functioning of the brain as consciousness to more understanding of what we're observing, then that moves to wisdom, towards wisdom?
That moves what?
Towards wisdom, when we actually start moving beyond merely observing the biological function of consciousness towards a deeper understanding of what we're perceiving.
Yeah, I think one could express it that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Though I'd say that, maybe this is my own way of formulating this, but when we're developing wisdom in a way, we're developing our consciousness as well, since consciousness then becomes capable of wiser functions or wiser activity.
But I would think that consciousness is more of like a camera type of, something that you can't really make better. You could just look at it.
I'd say that maybe the basic sensory functions of consciousness are somewhat like a camera, but maybe the higher mental functions, consciousness as involved in the higher mental functions, is something that can be developed.
Okay.
But the texts don't express it that way, but they express in terms of using this template of the Four Noble Truths. In that case, wisdom is to be developed. And then because consciousness is associated with wisdom, so when one is developing wisdom, then the consciousness that's conjoined with wisdom will also be developed. Okay, shall we move on then? Okay, now we come to the next section. So now we're bringing in another mental function. This is feeling, Vedana, in Pali, Vedana. Okay, so now the question is raised, the topic is brought up. Feeling is said, friend, with reference to what is feeling said. Okay, so then the answer is given, again in terms of a verb. Here we put in the pronoun, it feels, but in Pali it's simply vedeti. Just the verb is used. It's hard to express it without putting in a pronoun. So it's a little bit like when we say, it's raining. But what is the it that is raining? It's just the rain is falling. So this is feeling is occurring, and we say it feels. That is why feeling is said. Then what does it feel? So it feels pleasure, it feels pain, it feels neither pain nor pleasure. So those are the three basic types or tones of feeling. Okay, then we come to the next section. Okay, so here we have perception, now the next topic is perception. And so the question is brought up, with reference to what is this word perception used? Okay, then the answer is given, it perceives, or simply in Pali it's sanjanati, perceives. That is why perception is said. And now this word perception, again you'll see, I'll take this out. You can see that the noun, sanya, is also based on this root nya. So it's also involved with knowing in some way, except it just has a different prefix. And then you can see even more clearly in the verb, sanjanati. So again, it revolves around knowing in a way. But it seems a more primitive type of knowing, certainly than panya, or wisdom, and even than consciousness. Okay, so the question is raised, what does it perceive? And then it just for some reason, it just chooses one particular sense modality, namely sight. So it perceives blue, it perceives yellow, it perceives red, and it perceives white. So it perceives. That is why perception is said. Okay, so if you just look at the answer and take it very literally, you think perception is always involved with sight. But in fact, perception takes the objects of all of the 6 senses. So one perceives visible forms, one perceives sounds, perceives odors, flavors, tastes, tactile sensations. And now the question might be raised, it's not actually raised in the sutta, but I would raise it, and it often comes up in discussions. What is the difference between consciousness, vijnana, and perception, sanya? Because they seem very, very close. They're closely associated, and their functions seem very close together. And I don't find a clear answer in the suttas themselves, but this is the way I answer that question to myself. Okay, usually, excuse me. Okay, usually when consciousness is being distinguished, it's divided in terms of the sense faculties on the basis of which it arises. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. Whereas when perception is being analyzed or distinguished, it's distinguished in terms of the object. Perception of forms, perception of sounds, and so on. So in my way of thinking, I explain the difference in this way, that consciousness is, maybe you can call it the bare awareness or the light of awareness that arises based on a particular sense faculty and that opens up the entire domain of objects corresponding to that sense faculty. So I consciousness, it's consciousness arising based on the I, and it opens up the entire domain of visible forms to my awareness. Ear consciousness arises based on the ear, and it opens up the whole domain of sounds to my awareness. And so for the other sense types of sense consciousness. Perception, on the other hand, has the function of homing in on particular objects within that broad domain in order to label them, designate them, recognize them, pick out their distinguishing marks. Okay, so to give an example, so I consciousness opens up for me right now this entire domain of everything within the sphere of my field of vision. It opens up the whole field of vision and makes that available to me. But it's perception that maybe picks up, this is a flask, which it's on the table, so I know that it contains some kind of, or I assume it contains some kind of tea. And then perception will identify, okay, that this is the flask intended for me because it has a gray background with dark gray bands on it. Is it a light blue? Well, with the lighting, it's a little difficult to distinguish whether it's gray or blue. Okay, then it's tongue consciousness opens up the entire domain of taste to me. But right now I'm not tasting anything particular, but if I sip this, then I know that this is some kind of berry tea. Goji berry? So I never drank goji berry tea before, though I've eaten goji berries. So now if I am given this in the future, then through perception, then I'll be able to recognize and identify, that's goji berry tea. Or maybe you gave it to me in the past? No? Then I forgot, and so a new perception. Anyway, so that's my understanding of the relation between perception and consciousness. Okay, now another question comes up, and that is, it says, feeling, perception, and consciousness, are these states, these dhammas, conjoined or disjoined? And is it possible to separate each of these states from the others in order to describe the difference between them? Okay, so now Sariputta answers and says, he explains, feeling, perception, and consciousness, friend, these states are conjoined, not disjoined, and it is impossible to separate each from the others in order to describe the difference between them. And so with this, we're getting very, very close to the emergence of the ideas of, in the Abhidhamma, of what we call a citta, a state of consciousness, which is made up of a bunch or a bundle of mental factors, chaitasikas. Okay, so then Sariputta answers and he says, feeling, perception, and consciousness, friend, these states are conjoined, not disjoined, and it is impossible to separate each from the others in order to describe the difference between them. For what one feels, that one perceives, and what one perceives, that one cognizes. That is why these states are conjoined, not disjoined, and it is impossible to separate each from the others in order to describe the difference between them. Okay, so what this is saying is that whenever one feels something, well, let's put it this way. I prefer maybe to start with consciousness. So with consciousness, one cognizes something. So something comes within the sphere or domain of awareness. And then as one cognizes it, as one is aware of it, then one perceives it, which means one identifies it, one designates it, one recognizes it, one labels it in some way. And along with that cognition, and along with that perception, there comes some feeling tone. If one is, for example, seeing something agreeable and pleasant, then there will arise a pleasant feeling. If one is seeing something which is disagreeable, something irritating or annoying or threatening, then there'll come a painful feeling. And if one is cognizing something just neutral, not particularly pleasant, not particularly painful, then there'll arise the feeling neither painful nor pleasant. Okay, so here we have feeling, perception, consciousness. And in the Chinese version, which is translated from a kind of Sanskrit, there's also a little section on intention. The Chinese character is sa, which it renders in Pali cetana, volition or intention. And so when we have feeling, perception, and intention along with consciousness, what do we have there? Those four factors, what do they represent? They do, but it's not the answer that I was looking for. Well, we could say Chaitanya represents volitional formations, and now we have perception, feeling, volitional formations, consciousness. What do we have there? Yeah, it's on the right track. What we have are the four mental aggregates that go along with physical form. So feeling, perception, volition or intention representing volitional formations, and consciousness. So the four mental aggregates. So these four always occur together. So whenever there's consciousness, there is some feeling of the object, a perception of the object, some intention, even a slight one regarding the object. And what is meant when it's, according to the commentary, when it's said that these states are conjoined, it means that they have a common arising, they all arise together. They have a common cessation, they all come to an end together. They all share the same object, and they arise based on the same sense base. And so when I see the flask, okay, it seems to me, if I look at it with the gross kind of awareness, okay, that first I'm perceiving the flask, then if I recognize, this is a flask with Gucci berry tea, and I like it, then a pleasant feeling will arise, and then I'll have a volition or an intention to take the flask and pour out the tea. That's the way it appears, let's say, to our ordinary sort of gross level consciousness. But according to the sort of very precise way of understanding the mind that we find in the Buddhist psychology, on any occasion of consciousness, there is always some feeling, some perception, some volition. So even when I first catch sight of the flask, some feeling will be present. If I'm not clearly aware of it, but just marginally aware of it, then it'll be a neutral feeling. There'll be some intention regarding the flask, even if it's just the intention of not doing anything about it. Okay, so those states, they arise together, they cease together in one moment of consciousness, a moment of consciousness that goes by like that. They have the same object, and they arise on the same sense basis, either the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body sensitivity, or the mind. Okay, maybe I'll ask whether there's any questions. I'm afraid to go into the next section. I will drive people insane. Okay, young man in the back. Make sure it's on.
Okay, so when you're perceiving something, you don't want to be on the positive or negative end of perception, right? Is it better to be in the neutral portion when you are perceiving an object or a being or anything?
Say again, I didn't quite catch it.
Is it better to be neutral when you are perceiving objects as opposed to a positive or a negative aspect of something in order to avoid suffering or desire?
I'd say that this depends very much on the particular situation, that there's no simple answer to that. Sometimes people think that the ideal of Buddhism is just to be neutral under all conditions, not reactive either towards the pleasant or to the painful. But what I would say is that this maybe is an oversimplification and misrepresentation. Since the ideal would be to move towards those things that enable wholesome mental qualities to arise, and that that help one to abandon, to eliminate, or to reduce unwholesome mental qualities. That's the lunch bell. Oh, sorry. Okay, so so suppose, like, I hear an announcement that there's going to be a Dhamma talk given in such and such a place, or a meditation course, something, and I'm completely neutral towards it, then I don't go to to hear the Dhamma talk or to the meditation course. So I'm not taking advantage of that opportunity to, to cultivate the mind. If I'm being attacked by well, we don't have elephants here. We don't have tigers here. What do we have? A bear. Okay, here we have a bear or a poisonous snake. If I don't move or get out of the way and think, just be neutral. Yeah, then I'll become a nice supper for some animal. Well, I don't think bears will eat a human being. They'll just batter them. Yeah, so you have to, assess the situation. In fact, even the Buddha says in Sutta number 2, he says that reflecting wisely, one avoids, he says, a wild elephant, a wild horse, a vicious dog. Okay, maybe we'll leave other questions since this time is going by. We'll do the sharing of the merits now, and then we'll come back, say 12:15, we can have a discussion, our own question and answer session. And next week, we won't have a class because we have the annual summer camp here. So the next class will be July 10th, is it? Wow, time goes so quickly, doesn't it? That's right, July 9th. 10th, 17th, 24th, 23rd, 16th. Right, July 9th. Okay, so let us do the sharing of the merits. So we share the merits with the devas, the nagas or dragon spirits, the bhutas, the fair spirits, and with all beings. Akasata chabhumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabhumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabhumata Deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya Pavagupadaya avichihetato etantare satakaya upapanna rupi arupi cha sanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibbutting. Okay, so we stand and we do 3 half bows.